Oh, welcome to Virtual Road Trip Destinations Edition. My name is Callie McCune, and I'm the manager of engagement at the Indiana Historical Society. At the Indiana Historical Society, we are Indiana's storyteller connecting people to the past. We do this by collecting millions upon millions of pieces of paper that tell Indiana's unique story. These are things like books or paintings, letters, photographs, even maps, diaries. These things tell about Indiana's past. And then we find unique and unexpected ways to share and remember the past, whether that's through publications, exhibitions, events like this. All of them tell the diverse, unconventional, and sometimes saucy stories of Indiana and inspire a future grounded in our state's uniting principles and values. I personally love a good road trip, as I hope you do too. And I think there are some essential pieces to what makes a great road trip. You always want a reliable set of wheels. You want some great snacks. If I'm going to recommend something, go try the Albanese gummy bears from Hobart, Indiana. They're one of my favorite things, or the peach rings. You want a great mixtape of tunes to keep you going. And above all, you want a fantastic place to go. So tonight, my colleague Cheyenne and I are going to take you on a tour of Indiana. We're going to take you to some places that Hoosiers love to visit on their summer vacations. We know it has been difficult this year for travel, and a lot of us have been limited as to how and where we can go. So tonight we're going to take you across Indiana and across time through the magic of the internet and virtual and Zoom. And we want to get to know some of our state's better known and maybe lesser known attractions and destinations. So just a little bit of Zoom logistics. For tonight's program, you're all muted, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to add your comments to the chat box at the bottom. Just click on the bottom of your screen to bring that up. Make sure you're replying to both attendees and panelists so everyone can hear and see what you have to say. Also keep an eye on that chat box. My colleague Beth will be dropping links along the way for more information about these stops and how you can visit them today. If you miss one, don't worry. We'll be sharing all of them with you in a thank you email tomorrow morning. I'll also be sharing my screen tonight. If you'd like to toggle how you view your screen, just use the options at the top. I've circled that for you so you can see that. And so you're all aware, we are recording the presentation tonight. It should be available in the future on IHS's YouTube and website so that you can revisit if you'd like. So as I mentioned, tonight we're going to go on 6 stops along our road trip. Some of these places you might have heard of, some of them you might not have. There's a lot more stories where this came from, and we know that. Picking a few was really hard. We know that there's a lot of other places where Hoosiers vacationed in the past, but we hope this is a good start for you to dig further into our state's past and maybe be inspired for a road trip of your own whenever that time feels right. All the places we're going to investigate today, maybe with the exception of on the road, you can visit today, whether that's a state park where you can be outside socially distanced, or places where you can reserve a space and go at your leisure when you're ready. The magic of virtual with all of this is that we don't have to worry about the miles or the time between stops. So we may be zigzagging across the state, but we hope that if you go to visit these, you'll plan your own road trip with other stops along the way. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to my friend Cheyenne, and we're going to go to our first stop. So as a Midwestern girl, for me, I always think of a relaxing day at the beach and for the summer as somewhere to relax. And when I do that, I want the unsalted waters of Lake Michigan. Don't give me any beaches on the Atlantic or Pacific. That's me. I'm not into salt water. But living here in Indiana, when I think of Lake Michigan, I now think of going to the dunes. So how about you, Cheyenne? Do you like to spend your summers on a lake?
I actually haven't before. I'm more partial to the salt water, but I totally understand the wanting to be at the dunes. But did you know that the dunes weren't always the glorious piles of clean sand that we think of today? In the early 1900s, industry started to trespass on the dunes. So steel mills, harbors, and breakwaters began to pollute the area, impacting the quality of the water, which would have high levels of bacteria after heavy rainfall. And I don't know about you, but I really don't want to be swimming in waters with bacteria. Even as far back as the 1800s, the dunes were known as the birthplace of ecology, a place where we started studying how living organisms interact with their environment. Researchers like botanist Henry Coles did original research there on plant succession. Coles and other recreation enthusiasts formed the Prairie Club of Chicago, which led to the slogan, "Protect the Dunes." Other slogans like "Save the Dunes" and "National Park for the Middle West" and "All of the Middle West for the National Park" became anthems for the advocates of the dunes protection. On the screen, the first picture is Henry Coles, and the second picture is of the Prairie Club members. So in 1916, after the National Park Service was established, the first director, Stephen Mather, made protecting the dunes one of his earliest priorities, and he is seen at the front of this photo. Hearings were held and hundreds of people turned out to show their support. But the beginning of World War I shifted priorities away from national parks, leaving the dunes open to potential threat of being taken away over by industrial work. This is the same time that the highest sand dune, the 200-foot tall Hoosier slide, was removed by the Ball brothers and the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company to manufacture glass. Conservationists knew that they had to take a stand to preserve this national treasure before all of the sand was taken away. In 1926, Indiana established the area as a state park, but it remained relatively small in size and scope, and the push for a national park continued. Photos like these, which were painted on glass slides, were able to show Hoosiers the beauty of the dunes and captured the animals and the plants of the dunes. Several of these slides can be found at the Indiana Historical Society's digital collections, because seeing these pictures in color, even though they're very old, is super cool, and I would recommend going to see them. The artist of these slides, William F. Gingrich, was a lifelong educator, and it is assumed that he made these slides and used them for class lectures or talks before groups. In 1952, local English teacher Dorothy Buell rallied a group of women at her home to strategize how to protect the dunes. They founded the Save the Dunes Council, declaring, "We are prepared to spend the rest of our lives, if necessary, to save the dunes." Buell wrote Paul H. Douglas, Senator of Illinois, asking for his leadership, resulting in a meeting in the Rose Garden between Douglas and President John F. Kennedy. After the meeting, the Kennedy Compromise emerged and paved the way for the establishment of both a natural lakeshore and a port. So in 1966, Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore at more than 8,000 acres. Save the Dunes continued to fight and still fights, but they now have the current size of 15,000 acres, which was signed, and the dunes became the 61st National Park in 2019.
Thanks, Cheyenne. I love seeing the pictures of what they used to wear to the dunes. Because like I want to wear my flip-flops and my shorts, and like some of them are in suits trekking through the dunes, so I can't imagine the sand in their shoes. So I'm going to take us to our next stop, which is a little bit of a smaller lake than the dunes. But again, when I think of summer road trip, I think of going to water. And Indiana may not have as many lakes as Minnesota, but it has plenty of resort lakes. If you think of famous families like the Vonnegut's or the Lillies, or even famous Hoosiers like Booth Tarkington or musician Cole Porter, they all like to go to a pretty famous lake called Lake Maxatucky up near Culver for their summer vacations. But not all of those resorts were available to Black families looking for their own relaxing vacation. But at Fox Lake near Angola was somewhere where they were welcomed to escape the city heat and enjoy the activities of the summer. Communities like this were pretty rare, and we're fairly certain that Fox Lake was one of the only resort lakes that was successful and lasted for quite a while for Black families in Indiana. So as I mentioned, Fox Lake's near Angola. It was named for Daniel Fox. He claimed the land in 1836, but it remained pretty undeveloped until the early 1920s. When the first development started on the lake, this came from a group of white businessmen that formed the Fox Lake Land Company. Makes sense. They wanted to put a conservation camp on this lake in Steuben County, and they specifically aimed to sell that to Black families. As you can see by this postcard from 1908, it's a pretty swampy area, and it took them quite a few years to subdivide the land, get through the swamps and the tangled trees, to subdivide it, put some roads in, and get it ready for its first cottages. There was an original farmhouse on the property, and they converted that into a small hotel that later became a B&B. The barn got renovated into a dance hall and restaurant, and then a bathhouse and a pier were added. By 1936, there were 11 families that had purchased cottages on Fox Lake. And by 1945, that had grown into 32. Now, and this is an advertisement from the Indianapolis Recorder in 1938. That's around the time all the cottages finished, advertising Fox Lake as a place where African-American families could go. So the first people, or the people that were buying cottages on Fox Lake, were sort of the middle class. But it was also a who's who of Indianapolis and Indiana's Black community. There were families that did come from Toledo and Detroit and Chicago, but also from Marion or Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. A few that I wanted to highlight, there's plenty more, but just a few were in the picture you see on the left is F.B. Ransom and Violet Davis Reynolds. They were both early and very important employees of the Madam C.J. Walker Hair Care Company. Madam C.J. Walker is the first self-made millionaires in the country. If you don't know about her, come visit us at the Indiana History Center and learn more about her. She was amazing. And both Violet and Freeman Ransom were sort of cornerstones of that company. They both had cottages where their families would go visit on the Fox Lake. One person I got to learn about, his name was Charles Wilson, or Carl Wilson, I'm sorry. Carl Wilson ended up building 3 cottages on Fox Lake. It's a little hard to see his picture in the top corner, but he started his career and made money as an exterminator. And so this ran in the Pittsburgh Courier, and it talked about his ability to kill 69 rats using his method of extermination. And there are pictures of those rats. They made it into the newspaper, so that must have been a pretty cool way. But later he owned a chicken shack that was fairly well known regionally. You also had morticians like Shirley Winfrey, Henry Fleming, who was a politician, and William Alley, who was a real estate agent and sold lots of land on Fox Lake. He also managed restaurants and homes in Indianapolis. So by the 1940s, Fox Lake is this tranquil oasis for Black families. Not only is included in the Negro Motorist Green Book, that's where the house that was turned into like a B&B and a motel is actually listed in there along with the restaurant. But my favorite description is from a 1962 Fox Lake history booklet, where it says Fox Lake, that section of Indiana where the neighbors are a little friendlier, the trees are a little taller, the lake's a little bluer, and in the words of the Hoosier poet, when he said, "Ain't God good to Indiana," has real meaning. So think of when the school bell chimes to last for summer break, families would put all of their families in the station wagon along with their bikes and books and toys, and they would head north to Fox Lake. They'd spend the summer there from Memorial Day to Labor Day, with fathers maybe going back and forth to keep down their jobs. A lot of the mothers either stayed at home or were school teachers and had the summer off. And the Fox Lake became this community. You could swim at the beach. There were swim clubs that were created. There was dances, fishing, horse riding, boat races, church groups formed, fraternal organizations. It became this community that is still moved forward into today. Though the hotel and dance hall are gone, second and third generation families still own many of the cottages. Though demographics have shifted a little bit, it is still somewhere you could go and visit. It made it onto the National Register in 2002, and it's somewhere where we're hoping to keep up and keep the tradition alive, even though some of the cottages have ended up on Indiana Landmark's most endangered list. So somewhere to go visit when you're driving up north in Indiana. And Ralph, because I know you asked, yes, it is still a destination you can go today, though the hotel isn't there anymore. So now that we've talked about lakes and we've talked about big lakes and little lakes, let's talk about a different form of water that might not be nearly as tasty. So Cheyenne, one of the things I've always heard about West Baden is that it once sold for $1 million, and then just 6 years later, the whole resort sold for $1. Is that actually true?
That is completely true, but in order to explain the history of that, I got to start from the beginning and the history of sulfuric springs. So in 1913, physician Woods Hutchison humorously described how mineral waters came to be regarded as curatives. Quote, instead of rising still and cold and sparkling, came up with a bubbly and a sputter and threw up evil smelling gases or fantastic wreaths of vapor. Here was something new and strange and uncanny. It had an air of mystery and a powerful smell. The more he thought about it, the more it puzzled him. His only possible conclusion was, the devil must be in it. Whereupon the waters of that spring instantly became big medicine, end quote. If you were fatigued and wanted a cure, visiting a mineral springs was the way to receive necessary treatment. By staying at the springs for 3 weeks for a restorative retreat, visitors were able to bathe in and drink from the sulfuric springs. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally can't take 3 weeks for a vacation where I just bathe in and drink from sulfuric springs, but c'est la vie. When mineral springs first became popular, Indiana was ranked second among 11 states in the North Central region and the number of spring sites, 101, and the number of individual springs, 151. The state geologist Willis Stanley Blakely published a study of around 150 mineral wells and springs in 52 counties. Blakely stated that since 1886, the start of drilling for gas and oil, some 14,000 deep bores had been sunk and many produced water. Because of this, there was a surge of mineral water sites occurring after 1890, and the waters came mostly from artisan and other wells rather than natural springs. Resort bathhouses popped up all over Indiana as a place to be restored and find relaxation. So West Baden Resort, along with their next door competitor, French Lick, aimed to be the cream of the Sulphur Springs crop. West Baden Springs Hotel owner Lee W. Sinclair got his chance to make his resort Indiana's best in 1903. After a tragic fire destroyed the entire lodge structure in 1901, Sinclair took the burnt lemons and made lemonade. He built his resort of his dreams. This led to the creation of the world's largest unsupported dome with 6 tiers of rooms looking down upon the huge circular atrium. They not only had a sanitarium, but bathhouses, swimming pools, restaurants, casinos, and much more. If you wanted to go find some relaxation in the sulfurous springs, this was the place to go in the Midwest. And people did. Paul Dresser, boxers John L. Sullivan and James Corbett, and Diamond Jim Brady all traveled to southern Indiana to take in the springs. After Sinclair's death in 1916, his daughter Lillian and her husband took the hotel's operation and completed the renovations. In order to complete the resort as her father wanted, she added 12 million terrazzo tiles to the atrium floor, 24 6-story columns, which were painted to resemble marble, and the huge fireplace in the atrium was resurfaced by Rookwood pottery from Cincinnati. And of course, all of these renovations costed a lot of money, so unfortunately, this left their finances overextended. In 1923, Lillian sold the hotel to Ed Ballard for $1 million. After Ballard took over the hotel, it became a gambling mecca. It was clear that the guests no longer came to just take in the waters. Ed Ballard was friends with Al Capone, and Capone would often visit the hotel when he needed a low profile. West Baden and French Lick became a den of inequity of sorts, where guests could easily find gambling, plenty of illegal liquor, and a lady to entertain them that night. But the good times didn't roll for much longer. Just 6 years later, in 1929, the stock market crash led to the loss of most of the hotel guests. The hotel suffered for a few years before Ballard closed it. And then in 1934, he sold it to the local Jesuit order, as Callie had mentioned earlier, for $1, and they used it for a seminary. The Jesuits removed many of the property's elegance and eventually dismantled the building's 4 Moorish towers. From there, the resort fell into further despair until the exterior wall collapsed in 1991 with a buildup of ice and water on the roof and in the drain pipes. But don't despair, the resort buildings were saved in 1992 when Indiana Landmarks and an anonymous donor spent $210,000 to stabilize the building. In 2006, under the direction of Bill and Gail Cook and their son Carl, both hotels and their grounds had a multi-million-dollar facelift, returning the grounds to the days of St. Clair and uniting them as one resort. So it reopened as the French Lick Springs Hotel, and with the addition of the French Lick Casino. When the completed restoration was opened in 2007, West Baden Springs Hotel and French Lick Resort were born.
Well, I wish we could go back to the time and do some gambling with Al Capone. That sounds like fun and a little bit dangerous. But let's talk about something that's also a little bit dangerous is road conditions in Indiana. So when I think of going to great destinations, I always think about how we're going to get there too. And my favorite type of road to ride on is a soft, smooth asphalt that's just been paved, and I've missed all the construction. So all I have to do is ride along without any potholes. And I'm telling you, I'm based here in Indianapolis. We complain in pothole season, which seems to last a long time. But I probably shouldn't be complaining if we go back to 1905 and think about what roads were like in Indiana. They were pretty dismal. You can see a bit of an idea of that in the picture above. Asphalt and concrete weren't widely used by this point. So most roads in Indiana were made of dirt. You're lucky if it was graveled or bricked. An improved road meant that they'd been graded and smoothed out. According to a survey in 1905 by the state geologist, only about a third of Indiana's 68,000 miles of road were actually gravel or stone. So most of them were mud like this. And so if you're going to be traveling, it's always going to be bumpy. It'll be dusty in the dry season, impossible in the wet season. Many roads didn't even connect to each other. And, frankly, a train or an interurban is probably a whole lot easier. If you're a traveling salesman, if you're a roving preacher, or you're just trying to visit family, it's got to be a hard journey to get there through swamps and streams and seas of snow and mud. But this is actually good conditions compared to what Indiana's roads looked like in 1816, around when we became a state. Most of the roads at that point were dirt and kind of traveled through forests, most of them being based off either buffalo traces or Native American trails, and kind of dirt paths that were formed once enough big animals had kind of run along them. Roads were dangerous and slow, and most people traveled on horse or or foot. Like you couldn't fit a wagon through there. It was way easier to use waterways to drop all your stuff on a boat and just go down the Wabash or the Ohio rivers to get where you needed to go. But by the 1840s, there was a push to settle the middle of Indiana, the interior. And to do that, we had to find a better way to get from place to place. So Indiana invested in two major road projects. One was the National Road that went from Cumberland, Maryland, all the way to Vandalia, Illinois, passing right through Indiana. And the other one's the Michigan Road. The Indiana State Legislature funds the Michigan Road in 1826. And its goal is to connect Indianapolis all the way to Michigan, trying to get to the water again so you can get all your stuff to the water. So on that national road, when I think of a road, again, I think of like a 2-lane highway. I'm sorry, there's a cat yelling. The national road in 1936 or 26 was really a 35-foot wide dirt road. And what was acceptable were 18-foot stumps being on that road so that the wagons, I guess, they could just go over the stumps. Anyway, it was kind of a sloppy mess, and it was somewhat impassable most of the time of the year. So Indiana decides to invest in a new technique. They decide to put money in what are called plank roads. These are roads that are made of wood. Now, I think that might be a bad idea. You're probably thinking that's a bad idea, but let's talk about why it could be a good idea for Indiana in 1840. Why would it be a good idea in 1840? Is because Indiana's full of trees. There are so many trees in Indiana that it's said that a squirrel could climb a tree on the eastern side of the state, run all across to Illinois, and never touch the ground. So if we're trying to cultivate the state by taking down the trees and settling it, making a plank road's a great way to do that, right? So by 1853, there are 900 miles of plank roads in Indiana, and they are mostly in Indiana's larger cities. So think South Bend, New Albany, Madison, Indianapolis is getting there. And we use these plank roads. But plank roads, as you can imagine, have some major issues. The first problem is that even though a plank road was said to last 10 years, it only lasted 2 to 5. Also, they were expensive to maintain. The toll road money you might make off a plank road didn't cover maintenance fees. And lastly, wagons and carriages kept falling off them when it was wet. That's not good. And when a plank rotted, they had their own version of potholes. The horses would fall through, and then everybody else would fall through in those holes that they made. So plank roads really weren't doing it for us. My favorite way to understand how bad plank roads were from this limerick that was written in 1850s by a traveler who stopped at an inn in Franklin, Indiana, and wrote in the book when he got to the inn this limerick. It says, the roads are impassable, hardly jackassable. I think those who travel them should turn out and gravel them. And that's actually exactly what we did. We started graveling roads, and finally we got to concrete starting in the early 1900s. 1917 comes along. It's that national road that goes across the state. We pave 3 whole miles of it in 1917. All of these people, including Indianapolis's mayor, come out with that ribbon cutting. And the Indianapolis Star proclaims that in the eyes of Indiana and the nation upon Marion County yesterday afternoon, when 3 miles of the national old rails road east from the city limits to the county line were formally given to the city and paved. It was a big deal. They wanted to mark that it was the end of bad roads and the start of great roads. So what do? They hold across a banner that says bad roads over the street, and they cut it, symbolizing that Marion County is in a new place for roads. Now, I think we still find a lot of potholes today, but I like the idea. When I think about how bad it is to drive along certain roads, maybe I can think about how far we've come. So when we think about roads and road trips, my family always loves a good roadside attraction. We're a big fan of World's Largest. I've been to the world's largest cuckoo clock, the world's largest teapot. If you know other world's largest that I need to check out here in Indiana, please throw them in the chat because it's something I like to do. But we're going to hear from my friend and coworker at the Historical Society, Kathy Mulder, who's going to tell us about her favorite roadside attraction, Peggy the Flying Horse.
Kathy Mulder, and I work in IHS collections in access and preservation. Today, I'm here to talk to you about Peggy the Flying Red Horse, which is one of my favorite roadside attractions in Indiana. So Peggy is a souped up Model T Ford with a Pegasus built onto the front. She can buck and she can spin around and even has side effects. Peggy originated in a little village called Guilford, Indiana. So it's in the southeast corner of Indiana near Lawrenceburg. My granddad's cousins, Frank and Lester Taylor, had a little service station garage called Taylor Brothers. So they got started in the 1920s. So by the 30s, they were pretty well versed in automobiles. So Frank and Lester and a couple of their neighbors had this idea to build a trick car. And so they started working on Peggy, and they built a metal frame Pegasus. Now the Pegasus is for Mobil Oil. It was Mobil Oil's logo, and it may still be. So they built the Pegasus for Mobil Oil, and so that's how she got the name Peggy. So they built her, then they started taking her to parades, festivals, fairs, American Legion parades, because Frank was a World War I veteran, so he was pretty involved in the American Legion. So they took her to parades all across the United States. They went out to California, they went out to New York, but they did do a lot of parades in Indiana. And one of the cool things is that I found Peggy in the collection at IHS in the J.C. Allen and Son collection, because she represented the Dearborn County 4-H group in 1946. So in our digital collections, we have a photo of Peggy at a parade along the grandstand at the Indiana State Fair. So I thought that was really cool to find her in the collections here, because I didn't know that many people knew about her. But there are people in Indiana of a certain age that remember Peggy in parades. So you might be thinking, okay, she's a roadside attraction. Is she still running? She's not still driving, but she is enshrined in a glass case at the American Legion Post 239 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So you can actually go see Peggy, check her out, and look at her. But yeah, she's not driving anymore. She's not performing in parades. But it's kind of a fun stop to make in downtown Lawrenceburg. And if you're there, you may also want to stop by the Lawrenceburg Public Library. They have a mural on a wall in there with Peggy, along with some other Dearborn County treasures like the Hill Forest Mansion. Also in Lawrenceburg, it's right on the Ohio River Scenic Byway, which is US 50. So that's a really pretty road trip to take. And then if you're feeling really adventurous, you could head up Route 1 from Lawrenceburg and go to the little village of Guilford. It's still there. The Taylor Brothers garage building is still there. It's not in use. But also there is the Guilford Covered Bridge, which has been placed in a little roadside park. So it's just a beautiful little village. It's something neat to see. Everybody loves a covered bridge. Anyway, so I highly recommend checking out Peggy the Flying Red Horse.
Thanks, Kathy. And I hope you guys like a good roadside attraction. You go check out Peggy and see if you find others that you're into too along the way. So we are going to, if it will,
Kathy.
There we go. We're going to head towards our last stop, which is which has a little bit of legend around it in a lot of different ways. So Cheyenne, I know that you got really into this, so I'm gonna let you tell everyone about some of the myths around Rose Island and some of the facts around Rose Island.
All right. Well, one of the coolest things that I researched about Charleston State Park before we get to Rose Island was the fact that there was a rumor that European settlers had a castle that dated back to the 12th century, which was 3 generations prior to Christopher Columbus's arrival. This was called the Devil's Backbone. Although this is highly unlikely and has since been debunked by archaeologists, something that you can find at the Charleston State Park is the ruins of an abandoned amusement park. Of course, in the early 1800s, amusement parks didn't include roller coasters and spinning teacups like we know and love today. Amusement parks started out as a picnic grounds that provided a place for relaxation where families could enjoy inexpensive entertainment and food. It wasn't until 1893 when Chicago's World Columbian Exposition integrated shows, rides, and concessions, which we usually think of when we hear the words amusement park. I know that I love myself a good funnel cake. So in 1880, what we now know as Rose Island had the not so unique name of Fern Grove due to the amount of ferns that would grow there. This was the place that people would go for picnics, relaxation, and religious gatherings. And it wasn't until 1923 when it began to look like a traditional amusement park that we would think of today. A man named David Rose saw the opportunity for business and purchased the land. He added a swimming pool, a zoo, dance hall, golf course, dining facility, a hotel, and cottages. The amusement park right off of the Ohio River in Charleston State Park was called Rose Island and was a place that Hoosiers, Kentuckians, and Buckeyes would go for a day of fun. In order to get to Rose Island, there were steamboats that would dock at the levee at Louisville along the Ohio River and would take passengers to the park. However, the Great Depression slowed down business, but it wasn't until the 1937 flood where it basically wiped out the park and it was abandoned. During the Second World War, the Indiana Army ammunition plant owned the land, and when the plant closed, the land was donated to the Charleston State Park in 1995. The state has since improved the area by adding trails, restoring a footbridge in order to get to Rose Island, and has added places around the park where you can read about the history of Rose Island. You can still go visit Rose Island and see what is left of the amusement park, such as original stone structures, the swimming pool, which is now filled with gravel, and the original Rose Island entrance and renovated arch walkways, which you can all see on the PowerPoint.
I mean, I didn't know that we had an abandoned amusement park hidden in our state park. So I can't wait to also see what other maybe hidden treasures that we can find in our state parks as you go along. Well, that's all we have for tonight, but we hope that you enjoyed it and are inspired to take your own road trips. If you'd like to come back for more Indiana Historical Society programs, we have lots of things in store for you. If you feel comfortable, come visit us at the Indiana History Center. Just book a ticket at the links that Beth's going to throw into the chat in just a moment to reserve your advance tickets, then don your favorite mask and come check out some of our great exhibits. Come learn more about Madam C.J. Walker or Title IX. Grab a bite to eat in our fabulous cafe and take a walk along Indianapolis's canal. Parking, which is first come, first serves, included in your visit. It's a great time. But if virtual is still more of your thing, we have more coming to you. We will be doing our next history happy hour on the 500 Festival Princesses, there we go, on Thursday, May 20th. Come learn more about this important aspect of the 500 Festival and how they're serving Indianapolis's community. And then join our friends from the Chicago Botanic Gardens to learn more about Hydrangeas 101 on Saturday, the 15th. Gloria, I would say you can sign up for all of that in the link that's just a couple of links above in the chat, and other virtual offerings coming at you soon. Gloria asked about reservations for the Historical Society. Yes, you still need to make reservations to come, but we have openings most days if you want to do that in the morning and then hop in the car and come on down. Again, make a reservation, grab your mask, come for a fun day. If you missed your chance to donate or would like to make a further gift to support the Indiana Historical Society, we would really appreciate it. You can do that at the link coming up below. Your donation will allow us to continue to share Hoosier stories and do programs like this in the future. Lastly, you'll get an email from us tomorrow morning with all of the links that we've shared so you can go explore your own road trip, and a survey link will be included. It will take you 1 minute. We'd love to know what you thought, how we can make programs like this better in the future, and what you want to see both in person and virtually coming soon as we hopefully do this transition. So with that, we thank you for being here with us tonight. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we can't wait to see you at an upcoming event. Thanks so much for coming. Bye, everybody. And we're out. Oh, stop recording. Got it.